On the Seattle side of things, Matthew, not a great night for Geno Smith. In fantasy, he was able to help, Kenneth Walker get his points, Tyler Lockett get his points, 11 targets for DK Metcalf, but not a good night for DK Metcalf. Obviously, some bad luck with the penalties as well on plays that were called back. But the Seattle offense, Geno keeps throwing a ton, throwing over expectation, but it felt like he had a lot of misses, and the turnovers really hurt him last night.
He had a bad day at the office. I mean, that's all it is. Geno's actually been very good so far this year, but just, it's unfortunate on a national stage. He just, he was bad. He was kind of old Geno. It was very frustrating. 19% of his passes were off target. That's a season high for Geno. But, listen, the volume's in there. He's now had at least 40 pass attempts in 4 of the past 5 games. He's had over 50 in 2 of the last 3. We like, as a show, as a people, as a nation, we like DK Metcalf. We like Jackson Smith and Jigba. We like Tyler Lockett, known grape slapper Tyler Lockett. Seems like they're getting a little bit of production out of Noah Fant and A.J. Barner, the rookie tight end. And and by the way, we'll get to Kenneth Walker in a minute, but obviously the huge usage of Walker in the passing game now. I mean, I think Geno is bad day at the office, right? And I think it could have been a much better day if DK gets that second toe down, if there's not the penalty on the second touchdown that calls back the second touchdown for DK Metcalf. Bad pick in the red zone. There were a couple bad picks for Geno. Like I said, just a bad day at the office. But I'm sort of I'm still bullish on the entire passing offense of the Seahawks because of the scheme, and I think better days are ahead for Geno Smith, who I think is still a borderline QB1 this season.
I shudder to think of what anyone who's tuning into this show for the very first time thinks of Tyler Lockett, known grape slapper. Just a very strange sentence if you don't have the context, which I'm not going to provide right now. But with Geno, to your point, Matthew, he just wasn't very good last night. He just seemed a little bit off. He was seemed a little bit rattled by Nick Bosa, who had a ton of pressures, even though he didn't get home. Tyler Lockett, again, committing a penalty to take back a big play, a touchdown for DK Metcalf after he took back the catch for JSN last week. So I think at the moment, Connor, I thought it was pretty disappointing from Seattle's offense because I think the sneaky thing about the Niners right now is they have 2 good defensive players. It is Nick Bosa and it is Fred Warner. Even Malik Mustafa has a great pick and looks great. He gets hurt. Yeah. It just doesn't seem like this Niners defense has much, so I would have expected more from Geno and this passing offense. Do you think there's anything that's just not working with the scheme at the moment?
I think last night he just missed throws.
Yeah.
I didn't feel that way the first couple weeks of the season. I thought Geno was fantastic. Yeah. He was playing like a top 10 quarterback. It felt like last night, and it's not just the 2 interceptions. There was times where he just missed throws when guys were open because obviously the Seattle has enough skill players that overmatch it for a defense like the 49ers, but also they can't block him up front. They've been injured on the offensive line. They've been struggling to block him up front. Nick Bosa is one of the best pass rushers in the NFL. Geno was not rattled, but he was moved off his spot a lot, and that led to him being inaccurate, and that led to some of the turnovers as well. One thing, though, Jay, it did help with, and Matthew already mentioned this, is that Kenneth Walker got involved in the pass game. 8 catches for Kenneth Walker completely changes the dynamic of his night from a fantasy perspective because he only had 32 rushing yards and 1 touchdown, but he ends up with 21 points because, in a way, he was a PPR machine.
He was. And I think this is one interesting aspect of Ryan Grubb's offense is that he's just constantly lining up his running backs at wideout, which really helps because particularly the past 3 weeks where they've been down and they've had to throw against the Lions, the Giants, and the Niners, they're constantly in these throw scripts. They have a really high pass rate over expectations to begin with, and that really helps Kenneth Walker, who is an excellent running back in his own right, now has this kind of Alvin Kamara, Rashad White type of scam aspect to his value too. So that's great. I think also the fact that I think to their detriment, they went out of their way in the first half to establish the run.
Yeah.
When it was the Niners, their secondary is not great and you're down at the moment, so maybe you should just be throwing the ball. But 14 carries in a game where they were losing the whole night, I think bodes well for Walker's usage going forward too.
Yeah, Matthew, this backfield, we always talk about certain backfields that you just want in fantasy. You want the starter and you want to handcuff their starter with the backup. Right now, Kenneth Walker and Zach Charbonnet, if you have a way to roster them or just one of the two, whoever the starter is in any given week, they've been one of the most consistent aspects of fantasy at this position so far.
There's no question. In a game in which game script should have dictated that Ken Walker had a bad day, to your point, he finishes with basically 21 fantasy points, 20.9 to be exact. Plays 68% of the snaps. He was on 50% of third down, 6 of 6 snaps inside the 5-yard line. He now has at least 18 fantasy points in 3 of the 4 games he's played this season. As you Remember, he missed 2 games earlier with an injury, but 14.5% target share. He is kind of Alvin Kamara West. And I think one of the arguments prior to the season about Ken Walker was like, yeah, we know he's great, but he's this home run hitter. He's a little bit more boom or bust. And like when he hits those big long plays, it's awesome. But when he doesn't, it's a little bit of a challenge. That said, now because of his continued passing game usage, there's much more of a floor here with Ken Walker. We know the upside. He's got multi-touchdown upside. We saw it the other week, the 3-touchdown game. He's got crazy upside. He's got number 1 running back in fantasy upside, but he also now has a very nice floor. And I think if you were redrafting today, there's no way Ken Walker gets out of the first round. The only knock on him, Connor, is because we like the talent. We love the passing game usage. It's a good offense. He's obviously getting opportunities in the red zone. He scores another touchdown last night. The only knock on him is a little bit of the injury history. But if I was drafting today, like if I'm doing a guillotine league draft, I would draft Ken Walker in the first round and then just make sure I grab Charbonnet,
right,
and you're in good shape.
Right. It's what you said all summer with Christian McCaffrey. Listen, just make sure you have Jordan Mason at some point, even if you draft him around earlier than everybody else is willing to take him. That's Seattle's backfield is starting to have a little bit of that mold.
Hey, it's Matthew Berry from NBCSports.com and Rotoworld.com, and I want to thank you so much for watching whatever it is you just watched, or if nothing else, being too lazy to click out of the autoplay after this video started, after whatever it is you actually wanted to watch finished. But now that you're here, I'd like to take a moment here to ask you respectfully now, okay? I'm asking you respectfully to subscribe to the NFL on NBC YouTube channel. You'll get the latest Roto-World fantasy news headlines, all sorts of great shows, including my own Fantasy Football Happy Hour. So go subscribe now. Again, I'm asking respectfully.